The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
What you get when you mix a smug TV host with a governor who governs like he's lost in a Target parking lot. You get Greg Gutfeld absolutely torching Tim Walz like a gluten-free piñata at a carnivore convention. From botched policies to bureaucratic ballet, Gutfeld turns Minnesota's leadership into a non-stop comedy roast. No intermission, no mercy. This takedown is hotter than Walz's approval rating is cold. And yes, it's every bit as savage as it is hilarious.
Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there!" and then ran away. Although Walz's actions look bad to veterans, Dems say these revelations could really help him win the coward vote.
Oh, Tim Walz. If political leadership were a buffet, he'd be the room temperature mashed potatoes no one asked for, but somehow ended up on your plate anyway. Bland, unnecessary, and weirdly persistent. Enter Greg Gutfeld, wielding sarcasm like a chainsaw in a fireworks store, tearing through Walz's nonsense with the precision of a caffeinated Dexter on open mic night. This isn't governance. It's performance art. Yet the art involved finger painting with expired mayonnaise and calling it progress.
Exploited his military background to cover up his crime. He said it was related to his service and that he actually wasn't drunk. He just misheard the instructions in the drunk test. He blew a super high level. It was like, 0.2, driving 100 miles an hour. And then when he's running for office, he said that he wasn't drunk. I mean, this guy has creep written all over it. He created a snitch line, but lies about his personal infractions. He doesn't even own up to it. This is a guy who pushes a hoax about a sex on a couch, and then the closer you look at him, he's a creepy cuck.
Let's be honest. Tim Walz governing Minnesota is like watching a substitute teacher try to manage a classroom full of caffeinated raccoons. He talks like a guy who skimmed Leadership for Dummies and thought, perfect, my entire political philosophy. And the execution? Oh, it's flawless. If your goal is to turn the land of 10,000 lakes into the land of 10,000 questionable decisions and painfully bad ideas.
Saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Greg Gutfeld didn't even have to break a sweat. Roasting Tim Walz is like dunking on a guy wearing Crocs to a job interview blindfolded. It's as if Walz showed up to a debate with a kazoo and a whiteboard that just says feelings. He practically begged for it, handing Gutfeld a roast platter labeled extra crispy and whispering, "Be savage." At this point, it's not even satire. It's competitive sarcasm, and Walz showed up armed with glitter glue and a participation ribbon.
Walz is a strange dude.
Oh, he's strange.
He is strange.
Crazy.
Him and I are the same age. How does he look so much younger?
No, he's a strange guy.
Strange.
He called up years ago. I was in the White House, and he said, "My house is being surrounded by people with American flags." I said, "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He said, "I think they're going to attack me." This was during the riots and everything else. They were MAGA people. They like the American flag, all right? And they also had Trump. And I said, how do you know? There were about 15,000. He said, could you put out a word like that I'm your friend? I don't even know him, but that's the only time I ever spoke to him. And if you look back long ago, tweets, before Truth, tweets, long ago, I put out a statement. He's a good man, the governor. He's on our side. I didn't know him, but I didn't want him to get hurt. And everybody put down their flags and they left. Yes. He said it was a miracle. He said it was a miracle.
Let's start with the economy, shall we? Tim Walz looked at inflation, unemployment, and the mass exodus of businesses and thought, you know what would help? More taxes. Tax the oxygen. Tax the smiles. Tax people just for thinking about moving to South Dakota. Businesses are fleeing Minnesota like it's a haunted house built entirely out of CO2 mandates and social justice PowerPoints. And Gutfeld, he tore through Walz's economic policies like a raccoon through a compost bin. At one point, he practically yelled, how you managed to make California look like a capitalist utopia by comparison? Because under Walz, the only thing growing in Minnesota is government paperwork and the collective migraine of the middle class. Now, let's talk about crime. Tim Walz approaches public safety the way a toddler approaches playing with matches. Optimistic, delusional, and inevitably ending in sirens. His solution to rising crime? Blame society, hold hands, and hope criminals are moved by interpretive dance. It's like handing out scented candles while the house burns down around you.
On the same bad cocaine, but Kamala can't speak, he can't speak, Biden was so high he couldn't remember anything. Like, this is literally the dumbest administration of all time. Why is he talking?
It really is the ultimate clown show. And I said this in the 5. He's a clown without a circus. He
doesn't even need makeup.
He's roaming the terrain. Is there some carnival that I could work for? Yeah. I'll wash your windows.
He's a rogue clown.
Yes.
Who is just an inconsequential footnote to vice presidential history.
Yes.
No one will remember his name on trivia night, and that's going to be in 3 months from now.
Meanwhile, Gutfeld's over here doing stand-up with statistics, practically holding up a map of Minnesota with "Here be carjackings" scrawled across the Twin Cities. He compared Walz's crime strategy to a mall cop trying to stop a riot with kazoo and a clipboard. If Tim Walz were in charge of national security, Gutfeld quipped, we'd all be learning Russian by next week. And education? Oh, let's dive into that glittering dumpster fire. Walz, a former teacher, because of course he is, has turned Minnesota classrooms into sanctuaries of woke word salad. Forget math and science. Kids are now graded on their ability to identify microaggressions and construct safe spaces out of popsicle sticks. Gutfeld didn't just bring sarcasm, he went full blast. According to him, the only exam Minnesota students are passing is How to Be Perpetually Offended 101. Under Walz, classrooms aren't about education. They're performance art with PowerPoint. There's no detention anymore, just participation trophies and TikTok therapy sessions. The only thing getting rigorously tested in Minnesota schools is the patience of parents trying to decode the curriculum.
I'm especially talking about these old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country.
Dude. You're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Can you see the difference?
And can we please talk about the COVID policies? Oh boy. Tim Walz treated the pandemic like his audition for America's Next Top Authoritarian. Shut down businesses, arrest bar owners, fine churches, but protests? Totally fine. Apparently, the virus respects political alignment. Who knew? Greg Gutfeld couldn't resist that buffet of hypocrisy. He pointed out that Walz shut down Grandma's bingo night, but flung the streets wide open for massive demonstrations, as long as they featured at least one Marxist chant and a papier-mâché puppet. This wasn't public health policy. It was interpretive theater with a clipboard. And don't even get started on the budget surplus. Minnesota had a surplus so massive even Tim Walz couldn't pretend it didn't exist. So what did he do? Give it back to the taxpayers? The people who actually earned it? Of course not. He treated it like monopoly money at a government garage sale. Expand the bureaucracy. Hire more diversity consultants. Maybe even commission a taxpayer-funded mural himself. staring off into the distance, looking vaguely contemplative, probably surrounded by graphs and slogans.
Says that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every...
Gutfeld nearly passed out from the irony. Walz spending a surplus, he said, is like giving a toddler a credit card and asking him to stick to the essentials. Sure, Tim, because the Department of Overregulation clearly needed that new espresso machine and the gender equity executive yoga retreat. And speaking of bureaucracy, Tim Walz has turned red tape into a competitive sport. In Minnesota, you can't open a lemonade stand without 14 permits, a background check, and an official pronoun declaration. It's like Soviet Minnesota, with better branding and worse results. Gutfeld painted it like Walz was gunning for a gold medal in bureaucratic gymnastics. Every policy decision requires more flips, twists, and contortions than a Cirque du Soleil show about tax codes. And then there's this oddly clingy obsession with Gavin Newsom. Walz seems to have a California crush so intense. He's trying to turn Minneapolis into San Francisco's colder, more confused, and significantly less competent cousin.
Tim Walz vomits more nonsense.
I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Maybe it's an adult like Donald Trump, you bully the out of him back.
This is a weak, cruel man that takes it out and punches down on people.
Wow. Oh. Jamie.
What a
Painful,
douchebag,
huh?
Greg. That was absolutely painful. He was the keynote speaker at this conference. Can you imagine having to watch more of that?
He sees Gavin Newsom torch California like a Senate candle made a bad policy and thinks, brilliant, but what if I add frostbite and subtract job opportunities? It's like Walz is reading straight from the West Coast script of disaster. Only he's performing it in snow boots, with fewer vowels and more property taxes. Gutfeld didn't hold back. He quipped, if Gavin Newsom is a walking shampoo ad with the self-esteem of a Bond villain, then Tim Walz is his understudy who wandered in halfway through the play and started improvising in Pig Latin. Walz struts around like he's a love child of Bernie Sanders and a malfunctioning traffic light, posing as a progressive savior while tripping over every department he touches. And transportation? Please. The man pitched a multi-million-dollar bullet train that might get finished around the same time dinosaurs make a comeback. Meanwhile, Minnesota's roads resemble a post-apocalyptic Mario Kart track, and residents just want their suspension systems to last past age 30. But no, he's too busy selling fantasy trains like he's auditioning for Hogwarts, while real infrastructure crumbles like gluten-free toast under a jackhammer.
So the tone of the media was one of sadness, not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now, the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!" It's no wonder they don't do follow-up questions with Democrats. They're like the top layer of day-old skimpy bean dip. What's underneath, you don't want to see.
And Greg Gutfeld. He rolled his eyes so hard they practically registered on the Richter scale. The sarcasm was so thick, it needed its own zip code. Oh, brilliant move, Tim. He mocked. Let's toss common sense into recycling bin and invest billions into Elon Musk fanfiction on rails. Because nothing screams fiscal genius like a bullet train to nowhere, slower than a DMV line, and less useful than a solar-powered flashlight in January. Then there are Walz's media appearances. Picture a man cosplaying as a competent leader while delivering speeches with all the clarity of a dial-up modem submerged in bathwater. He speaks in rambling loops like a GPS permanently stuck in recalculating mode. Somewhere behind the scenes, his advisors are tossing flashcards and flares, just hoping he lands a coherent point. Gutfeld tore through it like a drunk poet at slam night. Watching Walz explain policy is like witnessing a raccoon attempt Morse code with oven mitts, confusing, alarming, and somehow convinced he nailed it. It's not just awkward. It's a full-blown Olympic event in verbal gymnastics that no one bought tickets for and no one wants to see again.
Meanwhile, Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman.
And when the heat's on, Tim Walz doesn't just pivot. He pirouettes like a ballerina hopped up on 5 Red Bulls and a subscription to The Atlantic. Ask him about skyrocketing crime, and suddenly he's passionately explaining how adding more bike lanes will somehow reduce felony charges. Mention the economy circling the drain, and you'll get a heartfelt lecture on gender-neutral parking lots and the emotional burden of asphalt governance. This isn't leadership. It's interpretive policy theater, where every crisis is met with a TED Talk on feelings and a slideshow about community healing through ukulele circles. Greg Gutfeld nailed it. Walz is basically a magic 8-ball in orthopedic shoes. Shake him, and the answer is always some abstract nonsense about intersectional frameworks or equity gardening. And the branding? Don't even start. Walz struts around like a down-home farm dad, but his idea of roughing it is drinking almond milk without a paper straw. He's a guy who shows up to a tailgate with kombucha and asks if the brisket is locally sourced. Gutfeld roasted him with the precision of a drone strike. Folksy? Please. Walz is as relatable as tofu at a monster truck rally, because nothing screams working-class hero like quoting Noam Chomsky in a fleece vest.
Video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it. They shake. He pulls her close and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh, yeah, weird. I've seen warmer embraces between Chris Christie and a salad.
Meanwhile, Minnesota's rural communities are practically screaming into the void, like someone trying to cancel dial-up internet in 2025. They wanted a leader who understood their world. Tractors, real jobs, maybe a church potluck or 2. Instead, they got Tim Walz, a man who seems to think greater Minnesota starts at the end of the nearest bike lane and ends wherever the kombucha taps run dry. This isn't leadership. It's lifestyle branding with bonus buzzwords. Walz governs like he's live streaming a TED Talk titled Empathy through Bureaucracy. Greg Gutfeld delivered the final blow with brutal flair. He dubbed Walz the IKEA governor. Comes a box, missing screws, assembly required, and by the end you're crying, holding an Allen wrench, staring at a wobbly mess wondering if you've accidentally built a metaphor. And honestly, he nailed it. Walz is the kind of guy who thinks policy is a Pinterest board and governing means filtering reality through interpretive dance, hashtags, and oat milk. Gutfeld saw through it all like x-ray goggles at a nonsense convention. Every bloated policy, every word salad soundbite, every sanctimonious sermon disguised as leadership. He dismantled it with surgical sarcasm and the precision of a caffeinated hawk. This wasn't just a roast. It was a slow-cooked demolition of Walz's entire oatmeal-flavored approach to governance, reduced to a soggy heap of mediocrity. And the best part? Walz probably walked away thinking it was a TED Talk tribute. Minnesota deserves better than a glorified group project in khakis. And with every punchline sharper than a DMV pencil, Gutfeld reminded the country that behind the fleece vest and passive-aggressive grin is a man governing like he's reading expired IKEA instructions. Confused, underwhelming, and missing half the screws.